as I was thinking about it, I just really appreciate the things that I have learned from
Mm.
it. And I will take these things with me into the eternities. They have been so beautiful and so beneficial to me. And I'm such a different person than I was when I began recovery, I don't know, almost 7 years ago,
Mm.
that I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back. Um, it was hard. It was incredibly difficult, but at the same time, I am thankful for what I have learned and become and am becoming, and learning that I'm not the end all, and just such beautiful things to learn.
Jesus land if they live righteously.
It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and I guess just from the beginning of this, we should say that this conversation today likely going to be fairly adult themed, some heavy subjects. I think that we talk about them in a respectful way, in a healing way, but there will be things that you may, if you've got the small children around, you may want to just press pause and come back to this episode at a different time. I'm glad to welcome in my guest today, Jeni Brockbank. Welcome, Jeni.
Thank you for having me.
Of
Love being
course.
here.
Of course. I'm glad to have you here in the hall. Everyone scoot over. Let's save some room for around the back row, guys. Everybody scoot. Did we scoot? Jeni has written a book, Healing in Christ's Light from Patterns of Sexual Betrayal. So now you know where the sort of headline of this whole thing goes. We'll get there. Jeni, I want to know a little bit about you. Lifelong member of the church, convert. Give me some of the backstory on who you are.
Yeah, lifelong member of the church. I'm the oldest of 10. Grew up in
Whoa.
I know, right? Yeah, grew up in a really strong family, gospel oriented, just did the things.
Now, let me ask you this about 10 kids in the house, because that's like two full cars or like the very stereotypical like 15 passenger van. What was the age
Right.
range? Where were you guys raised? Like, give me some of this, because I have no idea. There was five, and that felt like four too many.
Right. Yes. Sometimes it did feel that way, and yet who would I do without?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we grew up in Texas,
Okay.
and mostly Weatherford, Texas is where we call home. It's outside of Fort Worth. And I was the oldest of so there were 8 boys, and then one of the other sister is um I don't know, she's like third from the end, but there's 16 years between us.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was crazy because I didn't live with her for very long, but I sure did adore her and I prayed for her consistently for years, and so she was a blessing. But the nice thing was with 8 boys, here they are doing things like rappelling off roofs, and they're a little wild. They're really fun. But I had the opportunity to have my own room because I'm the only girl,
Yeah.
and so that was really good for me. But yeah.
Now, it's sort of and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but 10 kids in Texas, I mean, they do everything bigger in Texas, but not quite that big. Was it a novelty where people would just go, wait, what in the world?
It's a novelty anywhere.
Yeah.
Even here in Utah, it's not as common anymore. So we did have a big van that had, lots of seat belts and things like that. So it was different. It was for sure different, but it was also pretty neat.
When you were thinking about your own family, were you like, man, 10, let's go for a baker's dozen? Did you kind of think that way as far as your own life goes? Or were you like, I probably suspect, like maybe we tone it down a little bit and, do two or three?
Yeah, I don't know. At one point, I remember telling my mom I would have 20, but I was pretty little when I said that.
Sure.
And growing up, I realized I don't know that I have it in me to be a superwoman like my mother. I think more like 4, and I ended up at 6. So
Okay.
I'm also a novelty here.
Yeah. Uh, I am fascinated. What brings you or your family from Texas then to Utah, where you reside now?
Yeah. Well, my family still lives there
Okay.
overall, but for me, I went to college in New Mexico at New Mexico State, and things just weren't working out. And I just had this leap of faith kind of thing where I just was like, I'm going to figure out where I'm going to move. And from there, it's just this kind of long construed thing of how I ended up in Utah, but Utah is my home. I love Utah. I feel like I belong here. It just feels different. Those mountains just sing to my soul.
There seems for some people a little bit of a struggle, and I think that this is lessening as the years go on. But when you come from the church outside of the Intermountain West and come into it, it's a struggle where you don't maybe experience the struggle as much if you were born and raised in the Intermountain West and then move somewhere else.
Totally. Oh, definitely. And there's a different feeling, because when you're there, it's like I was one of 8 students in my high school of I can't remember, I think around 2000.
Jeez.
And so as you look at that, it was like um it's lonely, if that makes sense. And so you do kind of hang on to those people almost like their family.
Mhm.
It does feel a little bit differently. I still am friends with a lot of them on Facebook and things like that. Whereas here it is not such an abnormal thing that people are members of the church. And so it's not quite as close knit that way. There's a different culture that isn't always appreciated here, and
Mhm.
that's just normal, and hopefully we work on that and continue to fix that. But yeah, it is different. It is different than being in like the Bible Belt.
So you come to Utah after it sounds like quite the story. God sort of confirming, "Hey, Utah's the place,"
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, for sure.
and then decide that okay, you get married and then you have 6 kids, and then are you a professional woman? Is this book just part of another part of a professional resume, or is this a step out? Give me an idea where you come from in that respect.
No, this is really written from the School of Hard Knocks.
Mm.
This is not to necessarily further a career or anything, though I might go into therapy related to this subject and things like that. But when I came into betrayal trauma and figured out that's what I was going through, I really struggled to figure out how does that fit in with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I
Mm.
I had God completely. He was like my therapist, I thought. That's what I thought. Was
Mhm.
God was my therapist. And so from then on, I thought that I didn't need anyone else or anything else. And come to find out I did need them so badly. But then it was like therapy had some really worldly thoughts to me. And it,
Mm.
it does sometimes. And I love therapy, but it was one of those, how do I make therapy and the gospel of Jesus Christ work for me to where it's like this concept seems maybe off a little bit. Does this fit in, or can I tweak it a little bit so that I understand it better from a gospel context?
So if I
So
understand you correctly, and then kind of saying your words back, it's a melding of like the healing that we can get through therapists and the healing that we can get through Christ. Is that an accurate portrayal?
yeah, it's accurate.
Okay.
In fact, I write it according to a trauma model where it's like trauma models are the one I use is safety and stability, grief and mourning, and then it's like where you're working on yourself kind of thing. So yeah, but to do that according to the doctrine of Christ and to make that gel in my head. And I
Okay.
just figured other people needed to understand that as well and could maybe stand on my shoulders as I've stood on so many other people's shoulders to be able to figure it out.
And there are some people that are listening to this that go, I still don't have any idea what she's talking about. And some people that are like, oh, this is exactly what I need. I want to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to have you define trauma and what it actually is. What are we even speaking of? What is a trauma? What isn't a trauma? And then particularly betrayal as we start to break down some of these trauma models, what that even is. We'll come back and do that in the second block of the Cultural Hall.
Imagine running a small business today. It's challenging. Imaging and internet presence is an absolute must. Even with that, you're still a small star in a bright cyber universe. Now, imagine you have someone who understands how to get your site designed for your talents and then easily searched by potential clients. Imagine Lennon Design. Whether it's strictly a website or a whole package of logo creation, advertising media, and promotional materials, Lennon Design is your partner in business. They'll test the boundaries of their imagination to create something unique for you. When you need creative, affordable design, let it be Lennon Design. Call 801-699-3022 or visit lennondesign.com.
Here in the second block of the Cultural Hall, remember that you can become a Patreon saint of the Cultural Hall. Go to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. We like to say it's putting your money where your ears are. You think of things like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. We're like that, but in podcast show form. So patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. It means a lot. Even if all it is just affirmation that you're like, hey, that's worth something to us. Go to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. So, I think maybe we start with trauma. There can be things like, oh, that was so traumatic, and then there is trauma. Can you tell me the difference, or are they the same? Or
Well, one thing about me, like I said, I'm speaking from my own experience,
Mhm.
and the trauma I'm familiar with mostly is betrayal trauma. So if it's okay, I'll focus on that a bit,
Yes, please.
because you can have trauma in that, like, you go through a car accident and it was traumatic and it's this one-time event. Betrayal trauma can be a little more like that, where you get this huge discovery and you figure things out a bit, but mostly it's a little more complex, because what we've got is you're figuring things out, sometimes little by little, and it's more like an earthquake hits, and then you get all these ripple effects that come from it. So betrayal trauma can affect all sorts of things, to where and people, we don't usually understand we're going through it
Mhm.
until we're like faced with somebody looking at us like we're nuts, and then we're like, oh, maybe I need to step back. We have these moments, or I need my own healing, and we absolutely do need our own healing, because what we have been through is traumatic. When you find out the person you've been married to or committed to has been living a double life, or has been doing things secretively. Some of us don't find these things out for decades, and then it, like, just really shakes the foundation of who you think you are, who you think your family is, what your marriage was built on, and it makes it hard to function in a normal way, for sure.
So at a level that you're comfortable or willing to, like, can you tell us a little bit of the story of your betrayal and the trauma that came from it?
Yeah. Yeah, about 9 months into our marriage, I
How long
had
ago is
been.
this? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt it, but this is
You're
this 20
good.
years ago or
Yeah, 24 years ago.
okay.
So about 9 months into our marriage, I had first found pornography on our computer, and it was just these explicit titles that I could tell had been opened in our email, and I thought, well, men just do, they look sometimes, and I am going to be this really cool, forgiving wife, and I don't really want to make it a big deal. So I went to him and I said, I love you. I forgive you. Go talk to the bishop and don't do it again.
Mhm.
And at that point, I didn't understand the depth of what was going on. I didn't know that it had gone on since he was young, like 8 or 10. I didn't know that that there was really addiction involved in it. And this was back in 2000, so it's before, like, it's right when the internet is coming out. It's not even talked about very much.
Sure.
And so at that point I didn't understand, and I was just asking him little by little. It's like, can you are are have you done anything? Have you looked at porn? And he would say no. And I was really desperate to believe that kind of
Mm.
thing. I
Sure.
was, and so there's some denial going on for me, because there's other signs that maybe something is off, for sure. But it wasn't until like 17 and a half years in our marriage, and I realized, oh my goodness, there is something really, really wrong. I cannot put my finger on it, but there's this huge disconnect. There's unexplained anger, explosions, rage. I just could not figure out what was going on, but I knew I couldn't function like that. And from there, I felt prompted to look to look again at his computer, and I did, and I found um, quite a few things. And that's really where I was like, we are doing all the things, all of them.
Mm.
And it just spiraled from there, and I fell in love with recovery, and I fell in love with therapy, and figuring out who I was, and understanding these concepts. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I'm going to unpack a little bit some of the questions that I have along the way. Certainly, I think that there's a part of the audience that would go, "Oh yeah, no, I understand that. You want to be the one that doesn't freak out when you see something. That I mean, that's how we do it. We let the person know that they're loved and that that it's important." You mentioned that there were maybe some other signs that something was askew. Anything that would be helpful for people to know? I mean, obviously, when we see like files or we look into history, that's a pretty telltale thing, especially if
Mhm.
there's just a couple of you where you're like, "Hey, did you look at that?" And they're like, "No." And you're like, "Well, I know I didn't look at it. So I don't know why we're pretending that you didn't look at it because it was not
Right.
me and it's the two of us." Are there other things that people should have that either wave a yellow or a red flag that when they're talking to their partner?
Yeah, and I would say I'd like to discuss this subject like it's the law of the harvest.
Okay.
And when you plant, good things, you're going to see things that are good come of that.
Hmm.
And but if you plant things like pornography, it does come out sideways. And for me, where I missed signs, which I have a lot of compassion, of course I did. I didn't know what I was dealing with. But I did miss a lot of signs. And it can look different, by the way. Like not everybody's an angry addict, you know?
Sure.
Some people might tease incessantly or something like that. And really it's tricky because so often we're not going to see, like you're saying, the internet history or whatever, because they're very good at hiding it.
Sure.
It's just, that's what you do with addiction is you hide. So, we're looking for other fruits, and the other fruits are basically boiled down to humility, honesty, accountability, and a willingness to connect.
Mm.
And when those things are off, it comes out sideways in other ways. And so it's tricky because a lot of the time we're being gaslit or being lied to in some pretty significant ways, but we can't quite figure it out. Or there's these conversations that are going in circles, and it's tricky to figure out why that is. And so when we can zoom out and say, I think there's a lack of accountability here
Mm.
and they're not owning their part. And then we can look at it too for us and say, am I owning my part as well? But also, they lied about this really little thing. That's odd behavior. Or they are choosing to play video games incessantly instead of hang out with me or take me on a date or something. And
Hmm.
not to say that you can never do those things, but they're not willing to connect. And so when we can look at those four key things and say, yeah, there's a problem here. I don't know what it is exactly, but I do know I need safety. I do know that I expect more from a marriage and that I'm giving what I can in my marriage. And so, what can I do here to make this a little bit better? Because or at least to meet my needs until they're willing to participate more fully in the relationship.
I hear some people talk about this sort of moment as the turning all the lights on and being able to say, "Hey, this is what the situation is." Do you think that is like a very good kind of depiction of something like this? And then how do you know? I mean, you mentioned sort of a humility. Is it the, "Hey, we're turning all the lights on," and then you sort of are able to see how the partner reacts, and then that gives you a temperature as to where things really are, or how? What's the tactic as far as that goes?
Yeah, humility is a really cool subject because if I'm looking at it, sometimes it looks humble that they're like, oh, I can't believe I did that or whatever. But really what we're looking for in humility is, are they holding pain and are they owning their behavior?
Mm.
And are they, because if they're just self-degrading, that's actually not humility at all. We're wanting them to want to make positive steps for change and to just sit and we don't want to go to shame. It's not going to help anybody to go to shame. So that's not humility. And there's other tales with humility, like if they're defensive, that is not humble. And so, when we're having these conversations and it's like they're just defending, 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 no matter what, not owning behavior, there's some real issues with humility in that as well. And like I said, I have to watch that for myself too. I want to
Sure.
make sure that I am also striving for humility as well.
So does the trauma, as we kind of reinsert that in this situation, the trauma occurs when you think it was one thing and realize that life is so very completely different, or is it small increments of trauma that kind of come along the way until you've stepped yourself into trauma? Is it both? Neither? Walk me through some of that.
Yeah, it can be both. I mean, because traumas can be big
Sure.
events,
You
but
find
they
out your
can.
partner is cheating with someone, right? You had no idea, and
Mhm.
you walk into your home and you find your partner in bed with someone else. Obviously,
That would be awful. Yeah,
that's a huge trauma. And if
huge
you
trauma.
saw no sort of sign of it before, but I think similar to like what you're saying, I know that there has been this history, and we talked about this before, and we're still talking about it, and now there's a little bit more, and I found out a little bit more, and things have sort of
Mhm.
progressed as far as that goes. But both you would
Yeah,
kind of quantify as a trauma.
for sure. One is like a million paper cuts,
Yeah.
and those add up over time to where it really hurts to have a million paper cuts.
Hmm.
And that trauma is, they call it small t trauma, to where it just goes on for a really long period of time. It really wears somebody down. And like you're saying, we get these trickle disclosures, and it just hurts a little more and a little more and a little more. And so for me, like, I have very few big T traumas. I have a few, but it's more this like little gradual, gosh, that hurt, or I didn't understand that, or I, just learned this other piece of information instead of all at once, which is why it's really helpful if we're working with a professional that we could have something like a full therapeutic disclosure to where we can work with them to go through and have a full history, and it's a really painful experience and it's a really brave thing to do.
Hmm.
But the thing about it is when you do a full therapeutic disclosure is that you it's like there it all is, and you have a therapist there who's hopefully protecting both partners a bit, from big traumas that are happening. And it's like this foundation of somewhere to start to heal instead of I'm going to be re-injured over and over and over and over kind of thing.
Is there an equivalent within the gospel that you would say is the same as therapeutic disclosure?
No.
No.
I would say that we can't that really needs some training, and we're very fortunate to live in a day where that is happening. Right? And so um that's the cool thing. I feel like Heavenly Father's kind of opened up some resources
Hmm.
and people giving people enough education that we can come together and we can say, this is a problem and how can we better meet these needs? But the problem is like, um, say a priesthood leader wants to do something like that, um, which I appreciate the concept, and they're not trained to help and sometimes fall into where they'll misjudge what's going on, or
Sure.
they don't understand the trauma. Or I remember sitting in a priesthood leader's office not understanding what betrayal trauma was, but in it severely. And the priesthood leader looked at me just like I was completely nuts, and I could tell he's thinking, this is why their marriage is struggling, when
Mm.
really it's like, no, this is because I have a million paper cuts and this is coming out sideways now,
Mm.
and I don't know what to do with it, and I didn't have any healing at that point. So it's just it needs some specialized training. They're just barely finding out things. We're pioneers in the era of betrayal trauma. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a full therapeutic disclosure. I mean, but it is the safest way to do it if you can work out those resources to
I
do
know
that.
that probably what the counterpoint of that, the person, I don't want to label as like a transgressor, we all are, but the other side of that, the person doing whatever the behaviors are, would probably say, hey, listen, I can deal with this with me and God, I can deal with this with me and the bishop, and
Hmm.
if I stop doing this thing, th- well, then we're good, right? Then it's done and we heal and we move on. But the stopping of the thing is probably both really difficult and not the whole point of the situation.
Right. We heal better in community. We just do. But and like you're talking about, sobriety is only one part of it. Recovery is huge. It includes changes of heart, mighty changes of heart. It includes involving God in that process. It includes figuring out why we're doing the things we're doing. And that really can't be just, I'm going to stop this behavior. That is going to come out sideways in some other way, even if that behavior is stopped,
Hmm.
because we are going to be missing those key things of humility, honesty, accountability, willingness to connect that are so critical and that we all need.
So someone listening to this is like, yep, that is me. That is this situation. If their partner is maybe not having the humility or the accountability and stuff like that, it is worthwhile, if I'm reading through what you're saying, for that individual to begin some sort of therapy or discussions around that, even if the partner is not willing.
Oh, absolutely. We need our own recovery, even though that's a hard pill to swallow because it's like they're doing this,
Right.
And the truth is, though, we've been affected greatly. And the neat thing is when we do step into recovery, it is like stepping into Christ's light
Hmm.
and healing happens. Healing becomes available. And it's like I love Dr. Adam Moore. He talks about Christ heals in the light. I would say that's for the addicted as well, is that when we step into, and that can look at like anonymous, 12-step meetings, or it can look like therapy, or I've done group therapy and those kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily matter that our paths look different for healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what can we do to get there? And if something's not working, what can we do to improve on that? And to change things up a little bit. But yeah, it's critical.
You mentioned the term gaslighting, which is super fun, always on the internet. Everyone is a narcissist and everyone is gaslighting.
Right.
I would imagine, though, that having the opportunity, if you are in some sort of betrayal or traumatic situation, that being able to meet with a therapist also allows you to begin to identify some of these things and then set up boundaries. Is that the value of that, or is it strictly the healing and being able to visit with someone else?
Oh, for sure. All of that can be really helpful with a therapist. But it's also, I would say it's every bit as helpful with a community. And so it's really a scary thing to come into community at first, to be
Sure.
like, I remember my first meeting and sitting in the car praying, please don't let anybody I know be at this meeting.
Sure.
Please, please, please. And I'm not alone in feeling that way, but I'm really grateful I did. And I really love that I did because I found my people and people understand. And it's helpful to run these thoughts past therapists. It's helpful as well, though, to talk to people in the trenches who are like coming up with creative ideas for boundaries, or who are willing to just let you know you're not alone in this. And you don't have to walk alone anymore. Here we are. We are going to throw buckets of water on these flames,
Hmm.
and you'll be able to do that someday as well for others. And it's a really beautiful process.
You know, the church, well known with its addiction recovery program, and I know that there are lots of betrayals that aren't necessarily addictions, but since we've sort of ventured into this idea, and they have meetings all of the time available for all sorts of different things, and I think that that's a common theme that I have heard from people who have attended. I, having attended at a time to support a friend of mine, I remember thinking the same thing, going, I need to make sure that I let everyone know that I am just here supporting this person because I don't want anyone. And I don't know if that's some sort of pride or a lack of humility or just like some sort of weird social construct, but it really, like, when it comes down to it, doesn't matter. But how can people get beyond that? You said a prayer. Are there other ways that they can go, all right, I think this is, so let me venture a little bit. I think that some people would think, oh man, I have this persona that is projected of perfection. Certainly within the faith, we do a lot of that. And if anyone knows what's going on inside my house, I can't do that. So they'll drive several miles to go to a different county's addiction meeting or something like that. How can we just get past that? Or is it just better that they go a time and then maybe eventually they'll come a little closer? Or talk me through some of that.
Okay, I'm sitting here laughing because my first recovery meeting, I did go a city away.
It is. It's a thing, and I
It's a
understand
thing.
it. I understand it.
It's a thing. Um, I think, it's normal to feel apprehensive the first few times. It just is.
Mhm.
And that's okay. If we just can know that and just say, but you know what? I can't do this on my own alone. I can't do this alone anymore. It's just not working. And other people will have tools. And that's okay that I don't know. And I'm going to say this is really a brave thing to do, to walk into a first recovery meeting.
Mhm.
And I understand that there's people listening going, oh, I can't. I'm not ready. And maybe that's true. And maybe there's somebody listening who will go to their first recovery
Mm.
meeting. And I hope that you do. And just to put something else in, is that not all recovery meetings are created equal. Um, and if you go to a recovery meeting that feels yucky or whatever, go find a different one. There's all sorts of ones online. I work for a foundation called SA Lifeline, and we have lots of Zoom meetings that for SAL 12 step, for women going through betrayal trauma and for men going through addiction as well. So there are options. And if one meeting doesn't work, do another one. And something else, Richie, is that I was an ARP missionary. I
Mm.
love the program.
That's the
And
addiction recovery program, just in case people didn't make the connection.
thank you. Yes. Yes. So I was that. And I primarily worked with betrayed spouses
Mm.
and now attend those meetings as well. I think the church has set it up. I look forward to the changes that I hear are coming for it. But they
Tell
set
me
it
a
up.
little bit about what some of the speculation of the changes are.
Actually, I don't even know what they
Okay.
are. I could point out a few things, but I prefer not to.
Okay, that's fine.
But I would say that it's set up, it has a really great concept. And they run it on 12 principles instead of 12 steps.
Mhm.
And it's trauma based. And they bring in the gospel of Jesus Christ um, and this is for betrayed spouses, right?
Mhm.
They do work 12 steps, and they have come out with what I hear is really great for the addiction recovery program
Mm.
for addiction.
Mm.
And that just barely came out. So I haven't been able to go through that yet.
Mm.
But yeah, the 12 principles for those who are recovering, I think it's a pretty neat principle actually to do that. And I additionally work 12 steps through SAL 12 step, but they're both really valuable programs.
One of the things that I love about it is just as human beings, we love a program. And so to be able to, like, when you look at it as principles or steps, we go, what do I do? Well, first, okay, then what I did the first one. What is it's the second one. That's what comes next. And so, yeah, almost divinely inspired or very well developed these things to be able to go, here is what millions of people have also experienced. And they're always tweaking things and doing these things, but being
Yeah,
able to go, I feel this. Now what? I go this way and then this. And then
right.
you're at this point. And I think of that almost like how we are with life, and how to kind of bring this back like God-centered or Christ-centered is that, that there are definitely the steps or the ways that we make our way towards eternal life. Not necessarily so checklisty, but there are those experiences that we kind of grow and develop and continue to go. And I just think that that's kind of a beautiful parallel to this whole thing.
It is. And I was thinking about it recently because, so your listeners know, I am getting divorced currently.
Mm.
It's not, I don't get that fairy tale ending, unfortunately. But as I was thinking about it, I just really appreciate the things that I have learned from
Mm.
it. And I will take these things with me into the eternities. They have been so beautiful and so beneficial to me. And such a different person than I was when I began recovery, I don't know, almost 7 years ago,
Mm.
that I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back. Um, it was hard. It was incredibly difficult, but at the same time, I am thankful for what I have learned and become and am becoming, and
Mhm.
learning that I'm not the end all, and just such beautiful things to learn.
Interesting. You talk about the fact that you are getting divorced. Some would say that, well, no, the plan is you heal and then you stay married, and that's all the thing. Is healing possible without the desired? I mean, you would probably say that that's not the desired ending anymore, but I mean, without that sort of fairy tale, is it still possible without the fairy tale ending to have healing?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely possible to have healing. And, for me, I have hope for a better, relationship in the future, for one
Mhm.
that will be faithful. So I look forward to that. Um, I also look forward to just bringing to a different relationship my best self,
Mm.
and to bringing some different awareness to that, and to saying, you know what, this is how I want to show up, and it will make me better that way as a companion to somebody else. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
One of the most interesting things that I will not often, because you have to watch yourself, but relatively often comment, the reason why I'm able to be the husband to my now second wife was because of all the things that I learned in my first marriage, that I was
Mhm.
like, okay, and now I'm going to show up in a different way than I did previously. And, previous relationships before I got married, my first
Totally.
marriage was better than those previous relationships because I took what I had learned and was able to bring to it. I want to take another break. When we come back, there are 3 questions we ask everyone who steps through the Cultural Hall. We'll get to those as well as some other stuff. We'll come back and do that in the third block of the Cultural Hall. BestDJinUtah.com is the website. That is where you go if you would like me to come and DJ your event. Now, will I do a family reunion where you all wear the same t-shirts? You bet I will. Will I travel to wherever you're at? Uh-huh. Am I reasonable as far as what I cost? Yes. Yes. Do I bring a good time? Yeah, all the things. Listen, Best DJ in Utah, it's my company. It's a thing I do that allows me to be able to have the time to do the Cultural Hall. So if someone's getting married, you think, man, they need a great DJ. You're throwing a party, whether it's a 50th or 60th or 40th or 20th or whatever the party is. I've done them all and would love to be able to do that. An anniversary party, certainly done those. I did a baptism in 2023. Yeah, we did a big dance party at a baptism. Spoiler, not a Mormon baptism, but it was fun nonetheless. BestDJinUtah.com is a website. I will get back to you within 24 hours with a quote. Come on now. BestDJinUtah.com. Here in the third block of the Cultural Hall, you should know that you can always email us. It's contact@theculturalhall.com. That is our email address. You can say things like, Jenny's episode was so needed. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. More Jenny, please. You can recommend yourself as a guest, or maybe you know someone else. Maybe you listen to a podcast, you watched a TV show, you read a book, and you thought that would be an amazing guest in the Cultural Hall. All of those are welcome. Contact@theculturalhall.com. Or if you just want to say, hey, I get plenty of emails. It's just like, hey, that's it. Just wanted to say, hey, contact@theculturalhall.com. I have a question for you. Let me know if I am laying too much onto this. When you got married, I would suspect that you, like many members of the church, we pray about it. Maybe it was in the temple, or maybe it was in some other way. You got the confirmation that this was what you were supposed to do. At very least, you got the confirmation to go forward with it. Maybe you didn't get the heavenly messenger who came in the middle of the night and said, this is the man, and all that stuff. But there was some sort of like God confirmation for this to happen. And then it didn't work out the way that you wanted it to. How has it been? Have you dealt with any sort of what felt like betrayal from God?
Um, well, my story is a little different. So, yes, I mean, I have dealt with feeling betrayed from God, not necessarily in that aspect,
Okay.
because I would say that when I first approached God, I got this interesting response. And he told me, this is going to be hard. And it was as
Mm.
if my spirit responded and said, I know, but I promised to do it. And I thought
Mm.
that was weird, like, but it felt like something that my pre-existent self knew, and that
Mm.
it was important. So what I would say is, it has been hard,
Yeah,
and it has been really important for my eternal progression, my own eternal progression. And I don't know about anybody else's, but
sure.
for me and what I needed to learn, it has been important. But it is common that women who go through betrayal feel betrayed by God. We just was like, but I got this answer and I understood, and it was a very clear answer, and so it is common that is the case. And what I would say there is, I would love to bring up Job because he gets a little bit of a bad rap
Mhm.
when he goes to God and he's like, you know, he puts him on trial and he's like, here's all these things, and can you answer all these things, and God comes back and asks him these questions he can't answer, and Job humbly responds that he can't answer them and acknowledges who God is. And for me, what I learned from that is not that Job has a lack of faith from doing that. To me, he has a lot of faith because he goes to the God of his understanding. He tells him where he's hurt. He tells him, this really hurt me. And he gives God the opportunity to fix that and to repair that relationship. And so, I don't have a pattern for everyone, but I would say if we can be honest with God, he does work through those wounds with us. He does care. He does mind that we're hurting, and we can work on that relationship just like any other relationship.
One of the things that when I've talked with folks about it, and certainly from my own experience too, and I think as people, we just sort of say things like, well, if my spouse ever blanks, then I'm going to blank.
Hmm.
Or we say something like, well, I would never get divorced no matter what. I'm staying in there. And we draw sort of these hard lines with those things. I mean, it's probably fairly obvious, but what do you see as the danger to doing that? And then how do we know when it's time to what we thought it was going to be is not the thing anymore?
Yeah, that is such a good question, actually. I'll just start with how do we know? And really, that is just really between us and God.
Hmm.
For me, that took a lot of fasting and prayer. That took a lot of turning to Him, years of figuring out how He's talking to me, and deciding when was too far, when I wasn't willing to go any further. Um, but I would just say it's really important to bring God into that whole conversation because he is like if we're looking at a marriage covenant like a triangle, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
me, my spouse, and God. And so say my spouse has broken their covenants with God, mine is still intact with God. And that's really helpful to know because it's like, one, he's part of the covenant, so he needs to have a voice in what I'm doing here.
Hmm.
And two, he cares about my best interest. But three, I think the fear is that, we if we're going to break this marital covenant we made, especially for our faith, eternal covenants,
Yeah.
and that's serious, that that is a big deal. That is a very big deal. And so to realize that there are really beautiful promises, especially by recent modern or by modern day apostles, that
Hmm.
things will be made right. It is going to be okay. There is such a thing as, a victim in a situation where we have done all we know how. All
Yeah.
we know how. And even if we didn't, there's such a thing as the atonement, where we can turn to Christ and find healing that way. And it's not over. It's okay. It's okay that we're not perfect yet, and we're figuring these things out.
A topic a lot of people will bring up around this too is giving yourself grace, right? We, especially in the last decade, it seems like I don't know how many times or if people study this, but give yourself some grace seems like, along with narcissistic and along with some of these other, gaslighting and these other things that we seem to talk a lot about. I think it's valuable, certainly more valuable than those other that I brought up. But I think that it is a difficult thing in this sort of scenario to be able to give yourself some grace. I'm sure that as you look back, I mean, you said 9 months into being married, there was this first sort of flag. I think that it would be super easy to go, what an idiot. Why didn't I see it, 9 months in? And I could have done something about it then if I would have started addressing it, and maybe I wouldn't have been here. Or maybe I could have changed the trajectory of all of the things. And it seems like you don't have any of that. I hope I didn't put any of that on you just now. How have you been able to give yourself that grace to go, oh, here, me have some grace, and now I can be able to heal through it.
Well, just to say that I have had quite a bit of that, and I still practice, and grace is a great word for it. Another phrase is self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I can look at the situation and look at it more like God would, or like I'd talk to a friend, and just be really compassionate about it, because it is like, I don't know, what would my friend say to me? I just made this awful discovery,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just shaming myself over that. And a good friend would say something like, you know what? You have done the best that you know how. Like, this wasn't your fault. This wasn't something that you did. It's not because you're not enough. It's not because you're too much. It's not anything to do with you. This is destructive patterns of behavior that aren't because of you. And the more I can look at things with that kind of a lens, the easier healing is, actually. And I think it gets a little bit of a bad rap, because the concept is that if we're going to offer that compassion, if we're going to offer grace, then we're excusing behavior. We're making it so that it's like, because maybe I'm feeling shame because I showed up, like, in trauma or something like that. And I wasn't my best self. That has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I look at that, it's like, but the more I can look at that and say, you know what, I don't like how I showed up, but I can see why I did. And here's what I'm going to do for the future. It's just a more gentle way of changing that I find more thorough, because I'm also looking at why I did those things. I'm offering that compassion. One time, I was having a conversation with Heavenly Father in prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really busy shaming myself, just begging him for forgiveness because I had showed up this way that I just didn't like. And I was really fascinated. It's the one and only time he told me to do this. And he said, go look at a feelings wheel. And so I
I don't know what a
did.
feelings wheel is.
Okay, a feelings wheel, it's fascinating. It has the core feelings like sad, happy, that kind of thing. And then it branches out into more feelings that would describe that, right?
Okay.
And the feelings wheel I looked at, there was a category for fear, and all of the things I was experiencing were in that fear category.
Mm.
And then I felt this really strong fear not. And so for
Mm.
me, it was like he was telling me, I see why you're doing this. I know you don't want to show up this way, and this is why you are. And so when I could address the fear, I didn't show up that way. I was kinder and more gentle with everybody, including myself. So I do feel like the more we can offer self-compassion when we make mistakes, and when we feel like we're less than in any way, it is a better way of addressing problems that we have.
From the very beginning of what you started saying, when we started this conversation, one of the things that I've loved is that you're like, hey, this is my experience and what I know. And I think that although there are a lot of similarities between your situation and someone else's situation, I really do think where we get ourselves into hot water is when we go, well, I need to have a same experience like Jeni had, so I need to have that fear not experience from God, or I need to, and really where we're all are all so individual, and a God that loves us and knows us individually, it's sort of silly to expect that it would be like anybody else's.
Right.
Principles are the same. Maybe we need to go through some of the same therapies and those things, but our experience, the time that it will take, because it took you 7 years, it may take me 10 years or 2 years. It is all individual. For whatever reason, I felt the need to stress that.
I love that. Yes, thank you. Because it is going to look different for me. God, Heavenly Father, the Savior, they custom make these beautiful tailored stories. And it is going to look different. Hopefully it does. It'd be so boring if it was the same. And it's okay if my experience is different from yours. I hope it is in a lot of ways, because I want to learn from you. Yeah, I want to learn from others, and pick their brains about what they have developed and come into. So I really, really value when I work 12 steps, one of my favorite things is the concept God at my center.
Mm.
And so when we start to focus on other people, anybody, like I could focus too much on an addict or whatever and these destructive behaviors, then I realize I need to kick them out of my center and let God back in so that I can function better because I can believe him over anyone else. But that's the same with experiences is that if we compare ourselves, then we're not keeping God at our center, and that's a hard thing to remember sometimes, but it's a really important one.
Recently reading Steve Young's book, one of the things that he points out about love and God's love is that healing is not fixing. And
Hmm.
for whatever reason, that has stuck in my mind. And knowing that it's healing in Christ's light. What do you think the difference between healing and fixing is? Especially as that's the title of your book. It could be
Right.
fixing in Christ's light.
That's a good question because I came into recovery as a great fixer. I mean, we look at a drama triangle, and I am the rescuer. That is my go-to. And so the more we can step back and we can learn to do things like keep our baptismal covenant of mourning with those who mourn, instead of like, I'm going to fix this person and give them all these tools. And instead, well, I can just sit with them,
Hmm.
as they're grieving and as they're mourning and as they're figuring these things out. And if they want to know more, they can, they can. But it's the same with the person who we're married to, and we do need to be empowered enough to set boundaries and things like that for safety. But there is also this concept of mourning with those who mourn with the person who is struggling with whatever destructive pattern that is, because they also have a story. They have a beautiful story that will normally break your heart.
Yeah.
You know, pretty much anybody who would be in a recovery room, their story would break your heart at some point if you heard it. And we can hold space for all of that. We can learn to, at least when our traumas calm down enough,
Hmm.
we can figure those things out so that we learn to keep that baptismal covenant with them as well.
Yeah, important things that I sort of take away from our conversation is literally everyone has a story, and as it's one of the most beautiful and simple, and in the most recent years has been impressive to me. The idea of I'm a child of God, and so is everyone else. And if you can really lock into that, which man, sometimes I'm driving a child of God, but. To really consider that, I think that that's an important part of it. And then I also think that we talked about the 12 steps or the addiction recovery program and all of these principles. And I think that for people who haven't been through that experience, I think a lot of them they sort of other that. They go, oh, those other people need those things.
Hmm.
Where I would hold true that, you know, so many of us, all of us would benefit from being able to just walk through that, even if it's just a gospel study of, what is this and how could this reframe some of the things that you go through. Jeni, we ask everyone who steps into the Culture Hall 3 questions. I'll ask those of you right now. The first question is do you have a calling? And if so, what is it?
Actually, right now, I do not. I have children struggling with severe mental health issues. And so, as such, I did tell my bishop, I said, can you please just pray really hard? If it's meant to be, I will take a calling, but
Sure.
if not, will you not? So I am a ministering sister. I do enjoy that, but I don't have a calling currently.
Well, and ministering to your family, geez, one of the most important things. I
Right.
think there's sometimes where people are like, "Oh, I need to have a thing," and it's like, "No, sister, you need to be home." Or brother, I wasn't being specific to him. If you could pick a
Yeah.
calling for yourself, either one that exists or make one up, what would you pick?
I would make up a calling actually, and it
Tell
would
me.
be something along the lines of betrayal trauma, so that leaders can get the assistance that they need to help people who come into their offices. Because unintentionally, too often we have secondary trauma from what goes on in those meetings. But nobody's intending to do that.
Mhm.
Nobody is meaning to hurt anyone at all. We don't go into lay ministry and work many hours a week to cause that, but it does happen. And
Sure.
so for me, I would love to do something along those lines to make a difference.
The final question we ask everyone, we ask you to interpret it however you may, but the question remains, What is your favorite part of your faith?
My favorite part of my faith would be revelation. Because I just consider it personal and I consider it relational. So as I'm looking at that, it's more like I'm developing a relationship with a God, and not only a God, but a God who adores me and who knows more than I do, and um, have access to the record of heaven, that we learn about in the Doctrine and Covenants. And the more that I can figure out how God is talking to me, the more I feel like I know him too.
Hmm.
And to me, it just makes it so much more personal and exciting and invigorating.
Yeah. Well said. I love that. The name of the book is Healing in Christ's Light from Patterns of Sexual Betrayal. You can find a link for it in the show notes to be able to purchase it. It's there on Amazon. Learn a little bit more about Jeni, and hopefully you'll get that calling in the future to be able to make that changes within the church. And who knows, maybe the licensed therapist down the road. If that ends up happening, I would love it if you would come back in and be able to visit with some of the things that you've learned through that training. I don't feel like we can talk too much about this kind of stuff. So hope that you will do that, and hope that people will check out the book. Again, link in the show notes, so make sure you pick that up.
And
Jeni,
Richie,
what?
can I share one more thing, actually?
Sure.
I just want to share about the best DJ in Utah.
I
I'm
did.
not
Okay,
kidding.
hold on, though. I did not pay her or ask her or any of that kind of stuff as far as
It's
what you're about
very
to hear.
true. It's very true. So I just want to say that I have this family member I adore who's got disabilities, and we were throwing her this really big birthday party. I went to a lot of work with this party. It
It
had
was
like
amazing.
Winnie the Pooh, and it had, just cool decorations and a really amazing intricate cake. But you know what I got the most compliments on was the DJ.
Hmm.
I'm not kidding. Was the amazing DJ who came and got everybody involved and was so dang fun.
Hmm.
So if you're having, this is my own thing, but if you're having a party and you're in Utah, you got to call Richie to be your best DJ because he'll rock your party.
Oh, thank you. Again, I did not pay her. In fact, if you can see the video, I'm bright red right now because I do not take compliments well. Thank you, Jeni. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
We hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body, that if you're not healthy enough to listen this week, that you'll be healthy enough to listen next week, and that when the time comes, you'll be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, Chris at Alpine Lakes Travel, Rick McGee, Debbie Wanless, Chocolate Cake Bites Podcast, and the Tiger with a U will be saving a seat for you on the back row of the Cultural Hall.
Save me a seat, it's sure to be neat on the back row.